Hey, and welcome back to Modelling a Mustang in Fusion 360. So in this episode, it is pretty much all about the wheel and the detailing specifically, because in the last episode I was creating the wheel, creating the kind of right shape with the hub as well. So in this episode, I'll be creating those shapes that you see on the canvas there. So yeah. So begin by creating a sketch and clicking on that end of the hub because it's a flat surface as my sketch plane. And so what I want to do is kind of create those triangles that surround the wheel, surround the kind of hubcap. So first I draw a line down off the center of the bottom of the circle, and you'll notice straight away that that line is dashed. That indicates that it's for construction. So I have the construction sketch tool keybound to the letter X, so you didn't see me click construction, but if you want to create a construction line, just draw a line, click on the sketch palette on the right hand side. It's that very top blue highlighted icon. So yeah. So what I'm about to do now is create a second line that goes across. Again, this is for construction as well, and this is actually my first use of proper constraints, not dimensions but proper constraints. So in the bottom of that sketch palette on the right hand side, there's the list of constraints. The first one I use is the midpoint, so that centers that line, so the midpoint of that line is aligned with the bottom of the other line. And the other one I use is the horizontal tool, so that makes sure that line is perfectly horizontal. I could have used the perpendicular tool as well, because the vertical line is vertically constrained, and then I just give that a dimension. But those points are just for construction. So here what I'm doing, I'm creating my first 3-point arc, and I have that keybound to Shift A. I mean, you don't have to keybind it, but that's how I've just created that arc really quickly, rather than just going back up to the sketch tools. So as you get kind of more, as you improve more with CAD, you'll find yourself wanting to use key bindings a lot more. I mean, some people have like CAD mouses, which is something that I'm looking to get in the future, but for now, just use key bindings. What you'll notice here is I'm about to dimension the angle of this line here, and so I think I enter it in as 55 degrees. And then I do the same on the other side. Now what I could have done here is, once I'd dimensioned that, rather than type in 55 again, is if I'd have clicked the previous dimension of 55, it would have copied it across. And then what that means is, basically, if I'd have edited the dimension on the left that says 55, the right one would have updated with it. In this case, I should have done that, because it's going to be symmetrical. And so what I actually do now is, you'll see what I've just spoken about, but with the dimension of the length. So I've drawn 25 on the right, and rather than retyping 25 on the other side, look, I just click that dimension and it enters in, and so now they're copied. So whatever I do to that dimension on the left that says 25, it will alter the one on the right. Whereas with the angles, because I didn't do that, I'd have to enter their values separately. So in hindsight, that's just a mistake I made, but yeah. So that's looking good. Oh, one other thing I should mention with construction lines. Construction lines, you can't like extrude a profile through them. They have to be solid black lines or solid blue lines, whatever, for you to be able to do any features with them. So here you'll see kind of a floating dimension, like that dot at the top looks like it's connected onto nowhere. That's actually the radius of that arc. The easiest way to click the radius is to get the dimension tool and just click anywhere along the arc, and it will come up with a radius, and then you can change it. So now I'm drawing that triangle at the bottom left. Well, it's not a triangle, it's a parallelogram or a trapezium or something. Trapezium, yeah. And so I'm going to use a constraint again, from the sketch palette on the right hand side. So click those two and then click collinear. So on since kind of this version of Fusion, there's been an update where the constraints are no longer on that in the sketch palette on the right hand side. They're at the top. So if you're looking over at the right and not seeing them, you'll see them at the top. They're the same icons and the same tools. They've just been moved. But yeah. So yeah, I use the collinear tool there, and those lines are perfectly aligned. They're not parallel. Well, they are parallel, but they are perfectly in line. It's as if I've drawn one line and then just cut it in the middle. Quite an important constraint to use collinear. You find yourself using it a lot. So here, just offsetting. Again, it's another feature I've keybound to letter O. And yeah, just dragging that down. And giving it kind of a value. I tend to just naturally have my dimensions as whole numbers. Not all the time, but I just tend to. You don't have to. If you're working in engineering, then it probably makes more sense to have whole numbers. But yeah, you don't feel like you have to. If it's got like a dimension with a really weird like amount of decimal places, as long as you don't plan on like manufacturing your model, then just leave it as it is if you want. Yeah, and then here using the the 3-point arc tool, which I have attached to Shift A, and that's just quick. Yeah, and that, yeah, redo that a sec. So now I'm going to offset again, and what I actually try to do is offset that arc, and the problem, see there's an error in the bottom right. The reason why that's happening is you can't offset an offset feature, and the reason why that is because it wouldn't make sense to anyway. But firstly, it would prolong your computing time if Fusion even allowed you to do it, and secondly, by offsetting an offset feature, there's plenty more opportunities for things to go wrong. So just offset from the same feature, the same kind of sketch arc that you originally offset the first one off of as well. But yeah, that was why that error came up. So now just sealing these off, drawing a line up from the bottom part up to that section there, and that profile you can now see quite similarly follows the sketch. So yeah, and then using the fillet tool, I fillet these edges. So you can notice how the rest of that curve just disappeared, and that's kind of what fillets do. They will just kind of delete some entities for the fillet to work. So just be careful when using the tool, because you might like delete a line that you really want to keep in. For me, it wasn't important. It wasn't important to keep that line there, so I did that. And then I kind of spend the next, I don't know, however long, just giving it all dimensions, matching the radiuses, apart from on that one where all the rest are 3mm, that one's 6mm, I believe. But yeah, trying to see how the lines are blue, that tells you they're not constrained. So basically what I'm doing is just trying to turn them to black so I know they won't move. So that line's currently blue. By giving that dimension there and change it to whatever, it's now constrained, that line. And that one's now constrained as well. And the line at the bottom is about to be. One of the things I do in a sec is I just get a bit lazy, really. So once that line is constrained, what I should do is constrain them all. But because I'm trying to get through this project in a day, I don't think, well, usually they're not going to move about on their own. So I trust that the sketch will stay in the same place. I just get a bit frustrated, so I just want to move on. So you'll notice I leave those two corners, those little blue sketch lines, unconstrained. And yeah, I just get this just because I mean, it was laziness really, but I just wanted to get on with the rest of the model. Obviously, like I said, if you're in industry, you can't do that. I mean, I did a placement for an airport seating company for about 3 months, and everything was constrained. There's no, you couldn't find in any of their models any line that wasn't fully constrained, and you can constrain them in many ways by like dimensioning or fixing points or using the kind of constraints like perpendicular, etc. But yeah. So now I'm just going to mirror these 8 sketch entities across to the other side to match the other kind of parallelogram gap, or not parallelogram, trapezium, trapezoid. So that's fairly close to how the wheel actually looks, and I'm pretty happy with that. So there we go. I've got 3 sketch profiles, and I can use them to extrude a cut into the wheel. So in that table on the right, I then click to object, and for some reason it doesn't seem to want to select the wheel. And the reason why that is sometimes if you're like on a really odd angle, I don't know why it happens, but sometimes Fusion can be a bit janky where it won't select something because it believes something's in the way of what you're looking at. Like the tire was way thicker, and then if you just like rotate the model to like this view, it would have fixed it. But I didn't kind of know that at the time, so I just did a normal extrude. Yeah, so extrude that cut, and then so that kind of feature, I can go into create circular pattern, and then I want to click features, select the cut feature that I've just done, and rotate that around the axis. Well, you can click any circular face on that wheel and it will do that, and then up it to 5 things to pattern, and there we go, and that fits the wheel basically. So that saves me a lot of time rather than doing that sketch process all over again. But the one downside I will say for sketch patterns is they're quite they really kind of trouble your computer if you do a lot of them. This much won't at all, but I have done projects before where I wanted to model like kind of a house with a garden. It had fences around the outside, and I just did a really basic house, but the fences I did like the individual fence like panels and patterning them around. I mean, that was torture for my computer. So just be careful when you're patterning things. Don't pattern all the time. Sometimes it might be worth to instead of patterning the feature, what you can do is pattern the sketch before you cut it. So I cut those 3 profiles, and then I rotated them 5 times. But you can, before you do the cut, you can just rotate the sketch 5 times and then just extrude it as one. So that's 2 different ways you can do it. And then here I'm starting to work on those slots that kind of in between the wheel gap. Those pink lines that cover the screen there, that's just when you've projected something. They're usually pink. So yeah, the project feature, I think it's keybound to P. If it's not, I have personally then. But yeah, and so kind of, so this is one way I could do it, what I've done here, which is offset 2 sides and then draw 2 arcs in between those lines. But I could have used the slot tool. So that's in the sketch drop down, there's a tool called slot tool, and that would have created the exact same shape. So again, it's just knowing different ways of doing things, because you're usually finding CAD that there's probably about 5 ways to do everything you do, and it's just about picking the right way to do it. And I'm fairly certain in this kind of process so far, there have been some things that I've looked back and thought were pretty questionable. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you got any questions, just chuck them in the comment section. Cheers.